Hi everybody, welcome back to Sammy Snakes. I'm Sammy and this is Lilith, and today we're going to be doing a reptile Q&A. So this is Lilith, my female ball python. Out of my current reptile collection, she is my oldest snake. You can see the other enclosures over there. They're in my room because it's too cold in the snake room for winter. So on Instagram, I put a question box on my story and asked you guys to ask me some reptile questions. So I have them all written down right here. And we have 15 questions to go over and answer, and a lot of them are actually really good ones. Where are you going? Stay up here. Do I need to put you around my neck all the way? So our first question is, how do I know which heat mat or heat lamp to use? So heat mats, to start off, go by the size of your tank. So normally a heat mat for sale will sell the size of the tanks it's meant for. Obviously like a 10 to 20 gallon is going to be the smallest, and then you can have 20 to 30 gallons, 40 to 50 gallons, and so on and so forth. So heat mat depends on the size. For every heat mat though, no matter what size it is, you want to make sure you have a thermostat connected to it so it won't get too hot and burn your reptile. If you look on my Instagram, you can see one rescue snake I had that is now rehomed, Athena. I got her with very serious burn scars on her side, and also her heat mat had no thermostat connected to it, which was a big issue and obviously caused all these burns along her side. So for heat mats, you're going to go off the size of your tank for the size of the heat mat. Pretty much every brand of heat mat does the same thing. I know I have one Zilla heat mat that is an adhesive that I like to use because it's good for portable tanks. Like if I'm moving the snakes back and forth, or if I'm doing some cleaning and I have them just kind of like in a holding tank, it's really good because it doesn't stick to anything, so I don't have to worry about removing it and replacing it. So heat mats go by the size of the tank. For heat lamps, there are a few different kinds. The main kinds would be UVB bulbs, basic day lamps that provide heat but don't have UVB, and then ceramic heat bulbs that don't provide any light and only provide heat. So for heat lamps, that depends on your snake's temperature requirement and UVB requirement. If your reptile needs a lot of UVB, you're going to want to use a good UVB bulb. So UVB bulbs basically provide UVB light, but you're going to have to switch them out around every 6 months. Sometimes I'd even say 3 or 4. Because even if the bulb's still working, the UVB kind of goes away over time and won't be as effective. And not getting proper UVB, if your reptile has a high requirement for it, can cause a lot of different deformities such as metabolic bone disease and a lot of other issues. But if your snake or lizard doesn't need a UVB bulb and isn't like a ball python and gets heat from belly heat, so they don't need a heat mat, you can use a ceramic bulb or a day bulb. So a day bulb provides heat and provides light, and normally you can get bulbs that are on a day-night cycle. So you can get a normal yellow tinted bulb for the day and then a red one for nighttime. Obviously, like for a ball python, you wouldn't use a heat lamp because they get their heat from belly heat, so they need heat mats with their thermostats, not heat lamps. But if the reptiles doesn't need belly heat and they maybe prefer basking, then a day bulb would be a good idea. So a ceramic heat bulb would be good for a nocturnal reptile that again doesn't get heat from belly heat. So a ceramic heat bulb could be good for something maybe like a leopard gecko. I wouldn't normally recommend ceramic heat bulbs though, because from my experience, they heat up really hot really fast. So they'd only be good for something that needs a really, really high temperature requirement, like higher than 100 degrees. And other than that, I would not recommend a ceramic heat bulb. So then our next question is, how do I know which substrate to use for snakes? So with substrate for snakes, you're going to look at the size of your snake, what they're eating, and humidity. So starting off with the humidity levels, if you have something like a ball python that needs a higher humidity level, you're going to want to use something that holds in moisture really well. A good rule of thumb with moisture is that if a substrate is a darker brown color, it probably holds moisture pretty well. Examples of this would be coconut bark, coconut fibers, cypress mulch, and things of that nature. If your snake does not need a high humidity requirement, something like aspen, or if it's not a burrowing snake, paper towels or newspaper will work fine. So you want to look at so after you look at the humidity and what they need, you want to look at what they're eating and how they're eating it. So if you have a snake, for example, that's like Lilith, she does not like eating from tongs. Tongs scare her. We've tried doing some desensitizing, but they still freak her out a bit. So she won't eat from tongs, so I have to leave the rat in her tank. And normally I put it on a piece of cardboard, but I don't want her to be eating a lot of substrate that's sticking to a rat. So if I'm using a really loose substrate, like a coconut fiber substrate that's essentially just like soil, that will easily stick to the rat, especially because it's being thawed out in water, so it's wet. That will easily stick to the rat and cause issues when she's eating it. So if I have a snake like Lilith, I would use coconut bark because they're bigger pieces that don't really stick together and won't really stick to any of their food. Now, if you have a lizard that's eating live food on its own and not from tongs, like a leopard gecko or a bearded dragon, you don't want to use a loose substrate because you don't want them to be eating their substrate when they go to eat their food. Having maybe an accidental piece of substrate won't hurt an animal too much, but if they have too much, this can cause a serious impaction in their digestive system, and it can actually cause their colon to burst and cause a full infection. So you're going to want to use, for something like a bearded dragon or a leopard gecko that's eating live food by themselves, you're going to want to use something more like newspaper or paper towels or even reptile carpet. For leopard geckos, I would not recommend reptile carpet because I have heard some horror stories where they've gotten their nails or kind of their fingers stuck in parts of the carpet and have had them ripped off. So due to that, I wouldn't recommend them for something smaller like a leopard gecko that's a little more sensitive, but for something bigger like a bearded dragon, they can work really well. So for question number 3, which reptile is easiest to handle and likes to be pet? So the only reptiles I think that really enjoy being pet are some species of lizards. Tegus are kind of like puppies. So a lot of the times, Lilith, where are you going? I was just going over here. So a lot of the times they will genuinely enjoy getting some scratches in their special spot. Some crocodilians will as well. I don't really recommend crocodilians as pets, but if you're working at a zoo, maybe, or you're going to work in an animal sanctuary, some crocodilians do definitely enjoy getting some head scratches. I think for easiest to handle, that would go to any really slow reptiles, like Lilith, for example. I don't really have to do much, but make sure she doesn't fall off when I'm handling her, because she's very slow moving, and because she's not like a tokay gecko that's going to just jump off of me, or a golden day gecko that's just going to jump off of me and go somewhere else. So I can just kind of hold her, and she's not really going to go anywhere, and I can kind of maneuver her easily around with my arm. So easiest to handle for snakes, I would say ball pythons, specifically males, because they're a bit smaller, and because they're a slow-moving reptile, they're really easy to take care of and handle. Of course, this is only if they're well socialized and well behaved, like Lilith is. Easiest to handle for lizards would probably be leopard geckos or bearded dragons. I find older bearded dragons that are kind of slowed down are very easy to deal with and work with. And normally leopard geckos are pretty fine and not super spunky. So leopard geckos are definitely good. Lilith, you have to move. I need to go over there. And then, what are common misconceptions people have with owning lizards or geckos? So with owning lizards, I think the most common misconception is that owning a lizard is going to be easier than owning a snake because they won't bite you, which, one, is not true. Anything with a mouth can and will bite if it feels like it. So that's just a really big misconception that people have, is that, oh, well, I'll get a lizard, it won't bite me. It'll still bite you. Not every lizard bite hurts, But if a bigger lizard really latches on, that's gonna leave a bit of a sting, and it's gonna hurt a bit. Another misconception is that they're just easier than snakes overall, which I find not true, because for me, in my experience, a lot of lizards tend to be more active than most species of snakes. So they're really messy, they mess up all their decorations, especially something like a savanna monitor or Timor monitor. Like I said, you just gotta make sure she doesn't fall. Hi, honeys. Let's be more careful. So with that being said, they're a bit messier, and you also have to feed them more frequently. Like, even with baby snakes, you're feeding them like once a week. With baby lizards, you have to feed them every day, if not every other day. So I think that's a bit more difficult. And they poop a lot more because they're eating more frequently, so you have to do a lot more spot cleaning. So I think that's the biggest common misconception, is that they'll be easier than snakes. When you first started handling rats for your snakes, did they gross you out? Not really. My first snake ever was a juvenile ball python named Malfoy. He now lives with my cousin. Because I was kind of moving, I couldn't take him where I was going, so I gave him to my cousin. But and because he was juvenile, he was eating really small mice, like peach fuzzies and stuff like that. So I felt kind of bad at first because it was like this cute little baby mice, but I didn't feel as terrible because I was buying it frozen and I was just thawing it out and feeding it to my pet. And that's what my pet needs to eat, and that's their nutrition requirement. I can't help that. And also, it's not like I was killing a mouse or a rat, so I didn't feel as bad after that. The only situation that really freaked me out is when I let my dad thaw out a rat for this fat lady one time. And he decided, oh, I'm gonna thaw it out in my instant teapot thing, because it'll thaw out quicker. And he left it in too long, and the rat essentially cooked. So when I go to feed it to Lilith, its foot fully came off, and it was very gross, and I saw the bone, and I went downstairs. I took it out and put it in a trash bag, and I went downstairs, and I was like crying, and my dad was like, oh my god, what's wrong? Did she bite you? What happened? And I had to explain, no, I saw a rat's bone, and it was not the best. And now I actually like collecting animal bones ethically. I think they're pretty interesting. So, character development. Hi, honey. Are you getting sleepy? Yeah. So, anyways, our next question. How many times should a reptile be fed every week? So, if you're handling something like a larger snake, obviously you're not feeding it as frequently. Like Lilith regularly goes months without eating. I don't think she's eaten a meal since July. I still have been offering her food every month, and then when she doesn't eat, I just give it to Butterscotch. So, we don't waste food here. We just recycle it with my snake, who will always eat at any given opportunity. And then for something, so most snakes, even smaller snakes, you're only going to be feeding them once a week. And then for something like a lizard, it can be every day to every other day. It really depends on your species. For a lot of crocodilians, it's very similar to a snake. So it just kind of depends on the animal you have and what their nutrition requirements are. Our next question, do vets see reptiles? So certain vets that are avian and exotic vets, or just say they see exotic animals, normally will see reptiles. You can email a certain vet to ask, hey, will you see my snake? Will you see my lizard? And normally if they advertise that they see exotics, they'll say yes. So it kind of just depends on the vet and where you're at. I know to get to a vet to see Salvazar to get his abscess drained, we had to drive about 45 minutes because the vet right down the street from us wasn't taking new customers due to COVID, and since dogs and cats can contract COVID, they didn't want that to be an issue, so they weren't taking any new clients. So we had to drive 45 minutes to get Salvazar a vet appointment. So it kind of depends on where you're at. Can snakes get loose even if they have a very secure habitat? There's always a possibility of your snake getting out, because even if your habitat's really secure, you can always forget to lock a door, forget to latch a mesh ceiling, and they push themselves out. Lilith at her first home before I had her, where she lived for about 7 years. She was a little escape artist, and I don't think the top of her tank had any locks on it. And she was quite the escape artist, and they told me she had escaped quite a few times. So all my snakes right now are currently in 40-gallon totes that are clear so I can still see them. They're just cheaper housing than big glass tanks. And they all have a latch ceiling on the top. So they're all very secure in, and I'm not really worried about any of them escaping. But if your snake does escape, you should definitely troubleshoot and figure out how they got out or how they could have gone out and reinforce that area. And then obviously make sure your snake is okay or your lizard's okay and that they didn't injure themselves, and put them back in their enclosure. Are mice rats the only food for snakes? So most snakes do have a full diet of rodents, but there are specific kinds of snakes that don't need to eat rodents, such as egg-eating snakes. They eat eggs. When they're little, they eat finch eggs, and when they're adults, normally they'll eat quail eggs. So you just give them not a cooked egg, just a whole raw egg in their tank. They eat it. They have a special muscle or bone. I don't know a whole lot about egg-eating snakes, but they have a special muscle or bone that cracks the eggs. They slurp down all the juices and they spit out the shell, and you just have to clean up the eggshell. And then there's also garter snakes, which can eat fish, chicken livers, gizzards, just chicken. Some smaller ones can eat earthworms. Something like a DeKay's brown snake is way too small to eat a mouse or a rat. So like something like a DeKay's brown snake is definitely going to be eating like night crawlers or red wigglers. So if you look at smaller species of snakes, or just specific kinds that don't eat rats, there's, I would say, garter snakes, egg-eating snakes, and DeKay's brown snakes off the top of my head. But just a note, when you get an egg-eating snake, you should get one that's already a well-established eater, because getting a baby snake to eat is incredibly difficult, and you need to make sure you have a place to go to get quail or finch eggs. When your snakes are out, do they move a lot or do they just vibe? So that really depends on which snake I have out, because ball pythons normally are pretty similar, but all of mine have pretty different personalities. Lilith fell asleep, so she's napping right now, but Lilith is definitely the more curious one. As you saw kind of from the beginning to the middle of the video, she was moving around quite a bit and exploring a lot. So Lilith is definitely the mover. Butterscotch and Salvazar, when they're out, once they get more comfortable and they realize they're in a free space where they can kind of move around, they'll kind of go and do what they want. But normally it takes a little bit for them to feel comfortable enough to kind of come out of their balls and explore. Are you sleepy? You're sleepy lady. Would you like to read this one? No, you're asleep? Okay. When do your snakes constrict? So snakes, so I'm going to assume this is specific to my snakes because it says, when do your snakes? So my ball pythons constrict before they start eating. Once they strike at their rat or mouse, they constrict it because obviously they don't know they're eating frozen thawed. I'm sorry, did I scare you? I'm sorry, baby. They don't know they're eating frozen thawed rats. They think they're still alive. So they constrict them like they would do in the wild to make sure they're dead, and then they'll start eat them. And then if I'm holding them, if they feel insecure or like they're going to fall, sometimes they'll start constricting to get more comfortable and feel less insecure, which normally if that happens, I'll just kind of readjust how I'm holding them. Just a side note, if you have a snake and it's constricting around your neck and it's a smaller thing, like a ball python, you can put 2 fingers under it and just kind of wiggle around, or even stick your whole hand and wiggle it, and this will make them loosen up and you can remove them and move them to somewhere more comfortable. So our next question, can all snakes hiss? Yes, all snakes have the capability to hiss, but not all of them do. I've noticed that some snakes that don't hiss often, sometimes when they hiss, it kind of just sounds like they're wheezing. This specifically goes for Lilith. She gets angry sometimes and is a little hissy because, you know, she's a little older, she's middle-aged, she's not in the mood for any shenanigans. But when she hisses, it sounds kind of wheezy. And when she first did that, I thought she had a respiratory infection. And like, I checked, I did everything, and she was fully fine. And then I realized that was just how she hissed. And my dad observed that also. Do reptiles feel love for their caretakers, or do they just tolerate them? So most studies have shown that reptiles don't really feel emotions in the way that mammals do. So most reptiles don't really have the capability to feel love. A lot of reptiles can recognize their owners and do prefer being with their owner than other people. Like Lilith, Butterscotch, and Salvazar all know my scent. So when I'm holding them, they're normally pretty chill, but if a new person is holding them, sometimes they just stay in a ball the whole time and they don't want to come out because they know who I am and they're more familiar with me. Especially if you have a really smart snake, so like something like a king cobra. Like if you're somebody who does venom extractions and they know you're the person that's doing venom extractions, they're gonna be mad at you, not everybody else. So it kind of depends on what reptile you have, but I think most reptiles do prefer their caretakers or people they're more familiar with than new people. I just realized my monkey's in the frame. This is my stuffed monkey. I have like a ceiling tile ceiling, so I can push up the tiles to hang stuff. So I have my stuffed monkey right here, and he's hanging from one of his arms. How long have you been caring for reptiles, and how did you get into them? Ever since I was little, I haven't really had like a huge fear of snakes or lizards. I've always thought they were really cool. I got my first snake, which was Malfoy, as I mentioned earlier, towards the end of 8th grade, so that was about 3 years ago. So that's about how long I've been a snake mother. But I didn't get Lilith until 10th grade after begging my dad for a whole year for a snake, and then he finally caved when I made a PowerPoint presentation stating why he should let me get a snake. So that's how long I've been a snake mother. Easiest and hardest reptiles to care for. Easiest, hands down, I want to say, are slow-moving snakes that don't eat a lot, so like a ball python. Burmese pythons are pretty easy if they're well socialed and they're not mean. Burmese pythons are pretty easy other than their size, because cleaning up after them can be difficult. So I want to say ball pythons. For lizards, leopard geckos, and female bearded dragons are really easy. Male bearded dragons need baths more often to kind of drain out their pores. So I want to say ball pythons, bearded dragons, leopard geckos for easiest. And then hardest would be chameleons. Chameleons are really pushed at pet stores as like, ooh, a cool lizard, woo. But they're really, really sensitive and they could die if you looked at them the wrong way. So chameleons, hardest, maybe something bigger like tegus or a larger monitor. Larger tortoises, while their care is pretty easy, providing a big enough space for them is difficult. So any larger lizards or snakes can be a bit difficult. Even though I just said Burmese pythons are easy. Their care is easy, but finding an enclosure big enough for them isn't. I think the hardest reptiles would be crocodilians and venomous reptiles because there's more danger in taking care of them and you have to be more cautious. So like, if they need to go to a vet, there's not a lot of vets that'll look at crocodilians or venomous reptiles, so you have to do a lot of vet care for them yourself. And that's incredibly difficult and needs a lot of skills, and you need other people with you to help you, because if you get bit, you need somebody else to give you anti-venom right away if you have a venomous reptile. And like, if you're taking care of an alligator and the alligator rips your arm off, you need somebody to take you to the hospital. So, I think hardest reptiles would just be the ones that are more dangerous or need the largest enclosures. So let's see, is that all? Those are all the questions. So thank you for spending this portion of time with us today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this helped answer some of your reptile questions. If you have any more, you can comment them down below and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. This video was not scripted. I just kind of wrote down all the questions and was kind of giving answers off the top of my head. So if they're not well explained, or if you'd like a more written, in-depth explanation, I can definitely give you one. For references for a lot of these questions, you can watch videos from Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles, Snake Discovery, Go Herping, and there are also a lot of exotic vet TV shows you can refer to for a lot of these things. So that's all from us. Bye. Bye. So, we'll see you again soon. The next video, I believe my next video will be about leopard geckos with my gecko Snowy. So, I'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.